everyone, in this video of Accelerated Chess Dragon, we're going to be looking at another chess opening, and this is the Sicilian defense, and it's specifically about the Closed Sicilian. Now, how is the Closed Sicilian generally played? White will go e4, black will go c5, and now white goes for the move knight c3. And if you've seen one of my videos I made on the Sicilian defense from white's perspective, you know how the Grand Prix attack can usually be achieved by this, usually by white going f4, bringing the knight out to f3, right behind the pawn, and then just developing from there. Now, after knight c3, here black is actually going to go for the move g6. And what black is doing is they want to fianchetto the bishop and use it along this very powerful diagonal. And then they also want to bring this knight out to c6 and simply get the development that you would normally see in the Sicilian. With the one catch being that white has developed the pieces in a slightly different arrangement. Here, white goes g3, also trying to fianchetto the bishop, and bishop g7. Black now is utilizing this bishop along this powerful diagonal. And white does too, however, the only downside is that this pawn is always blocking this bishop's way. So that's just the one downside. Other than that, white's bishop is not really that bad. Knight c6, d3, and this d3 move wants to try including this bishop into the game. Playing b3 could work, but the bishop would be a lot better placed on somewhere like e3, where it exerts pressure on black's queenside weaknesses. So d6, knight, ge2 is one move here, and there are also two other options where white can go bishop e3, but also can go f4. And we're first going to be looking at the move bishop to e3. If bishop e3 is played, then black develops the knight out to f6, and white goes h3. Why does white go h3? Well, there are always ideas in the Sicilian where black can try to play the move knight g4, attack this bishop on e3, and get rid of white's most strongest attacking piece, essentially. And you've seen me talk about this a lot of times in many of my Sicilian videos, and it's because that bishop on e3 can always be traded off for this bishop on g7, and if white is able to do that, then the attack will really happen and it'll be in white's favor. So black always has ideas of trading the bishop off for the knight on f6, which isn't necessarily the best trade for white. So after knight f6 is played with ideas of going to g4, white goes for the simple h3 move, stopping knight g4. And now black castles, and white goes queen to d2, trying to get this bishop h6 idea. And here black plays a very nice trick that prevents white from going bishop to h6. They go knight d4, and the idea is that if you go bishop to h6 now, black can simply take the bishop, and if you play queen takes h6, then you lose the pawn on c2. And with that, you also lose the rook on a1. So you can't necessarily play bishop h6, meaning that you must guard the threat. So knight d1, and here e5. Black tries to cement the knight on the d4 square. Now you still cannot go bishop h6 because of that very reason, so white goes c3, first kicking the knight back. And after the knight goes back, then only you have considerations of going for this bishop h6 move. However, white doesn't do it immediately. Instead, they go knight e2. They're trying to build up their position, mainly by playing moves like f4, continuing the attack that way rather than immediately just bringing the bishop out to h6. And after knight e2 is played, black will play b6 and strengthen the defense of the c5 pawn. And generally after this, black has ideas of fianchettoing on the queen side and using this bishop to their advantage. And who knows, if the lines open up in black's favor, then definitely black could be the one who's attacking, not just white. So that was the move bishop e3. Another move to consider is f4. And if f4 is played, then just knight f6, same idea. Knight f3 by white, and bishop to g4 by black. Black wants to eliminate the knight on f3, and essentially use the d4 square for their own knight. Now, after castles by both sides, white tries to kick the bishop away with h3. However, this doesn't exactly work because black can just trade the bishops off, go rook to b8, and now the idea is to simply jump the knight into the d4 square. And that knight has a lot of control when it's on the d4 square, so white tries to prevent this with bishop to e3. Now, you might be asking, why did black have to play the move rook b8 and then go for knight to d4? Well, it turns out you could actually go for knight to d4 immediately, However, the one problem is that after queen to f2, this bishop coming to e3 is going to challenge the knight. Another thing is that this knight can go back to d1, and then white can simply push the pawn to c3. The knight's powerful grip on this d4 square slowly fades away. And yes, you can make the argument that that happens as well once the bishop reaches e3, but now black doesn't actually have the idea of just trying to go knight d4. Now black has the idea of trying to get b5 in. So knight d7, a4, white stops the idea of b5, a6 by black, g4, and now before playing the move b5, black wants to at least seize the control of the powerful d4 square, queen f2 and b5. And black is getting a lot of space on the queen side, and this definitely is giving enough counterplay for black, considering that most of the attack is happening on the king side. So after a trade of pawns, generally black should be considered slightly better, as these pawns can also create a lot of counterplay on the queen side, and you always have the option of maybe even going rook a8, trading the rooks off on the a file, and you are the one who gets more control of the a file. You also might be thinking of playing moves like b4, maybe knight b6, and then somehow getting this knight into the a4 square. All of these ideas are considerable if you are playing the black pieces. Now, other than f4 and bishop to e3, you also have one other move as white, and that is knight g to e2. And with knight g e2, what white's trying to do is trying to guard the d4 square. So black develops the knight out to f6, white castles, black castles as well, h3, and now the move knight e8. What is knight e8 trying to do? Well, it actually does two things. The first thing it tries to do is, if bishop e3 is played, this knight jumps into d4. Previously, that couldn't happen because the knight on f6 was blocking the bishop on g7's defense against the d4 square. But now after bishop e3, knight d4, that bishop is guarding the d4 square. And you can't play knight takes d4 in fear of being forked. So if you would want to get rid of the powerful knight, you would have to play bishop takes d4, which definitely could favor black with a nice pawn wedge in the center, although it does get rid of black's most powerful piece at the moment. And another thing with this knight to e8 move is that it tries to strike with f5. And f5 is a very nice idea of trying to break open white's nice central control, and if black is able to get the f5 move in, then the development of black's pieces can be accelerated threefold. So bishop e3, knight d4, and now queen to d2. So queen d2 tries to, again, get that battery idea of bishop to h6. So black just sidesteps any ideas of this bishop attacking the long diagonal and goes rook to b8. White plays f4 and black goes f5, so yet again, black is trying to strike in the center. Near, white goes knight to d1, and the idea of knight d1 is to simply play c3 and kick the knight away. Either make it trade for white's knight on e2, or just kick it back somewhere like c6, e6, or b5, where it isn't really doing anything well. So b5 by black, trying to gain more space. c3, and now a trade of knights and b4. And generally after this position, black is trying to yet again strike on the queen side, and that's basically the idea. Black wants to strike on the queen side, and white wants to get an attack on the king side. Both sides attacking on opposite sides of the board is generally going to create some chaos, and it'll just be a very interesting game to see, and very dynamic one as well. So after b4, that is the end of the variation. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you have any suggestions or feedback for me, please let me know in the comment section, and stay tuned for more chess.